Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are thrilled to have you join us for this exclusive panel discussion Beyond Hospitality: How Experience Driven Industries Are Shaping the Future of Business. As we know, hospitality is no longer confined to hotels and restaurants. Today, it's a mindset, a strategy, and a competitive advantage that extends across industries, from real estate to healthcare, technology, construction, luxury, food and beverage, and even city planning. Every industry that thrives on customer experience is, in some way, in the business of hospitality. And as consumer expectations evolve, businesses must rethink how they engage, serve, and surprise the audiences. Whether it's a hospital designing a more patient centric experience, a tech company using AI for hyper personalized service, or a real estate developer curating spaces that prioritize lifestyle and comfort, hospitality is the common thread weaving through all these industries. And today we're bringing together South Florida's top industry leaders to explore this intersectionality of hospitality, how it shapes, influences, and transforms the field. And each panelist brings unique expertise in applying hospitality driven strategies to enhance experiences, build brand loyalty, and drive innovation. After our discussion, we will open the floor for audience Q&A. So please feel free to take notes and prepare your questions. Now that we set the stage, let's meet our panelists. Each of whom brings a unique perspective on how hospitality is shaping the future of business. Rather than diving into lengthy bios, I'll introduce each of you briefly, and then we'll kick things off with a quick icebreaker to get to know you beyond your titles. Alex Krys, managing partner, Juniper Capital. He's an expert in hospitality driven real estate development. Alex specializes in creating spaces where experience and design feel property value and guest engagement. Kamal Hotchandani, CEO of Haute Living, a leader in luxury lifestyle and media. Kamal understands how curated experiences drive loyalty among high net worth individuals. And this Chad Moss, Executive Vice President for Moss Construction, Chad has helped shape the skyline of South Florida, overseeing the construction of hospitality-driven spaces that define modern urban living. Ben Mollier, Corporate Vice President, Baptist Health, is a pioneer in hospitality-infused healthcare. Ben is dedicated to transforming patient experiences through service-driven innovations. Maria Dechi, Executive Director, Refresh Miami. Maria is at the forefront of tech innovation, exploring how AI, automation, and digital transformation are redefining hospitality experiences. And Stephen Van Osen, Senior Vice President, Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits, with deep expertise in beverage industry experiences. Stephen knows how hospitality elevates guest engagement from premium wine tastings to exclusive brand partnerships. And Thatcher Brown, Senior Vice President, Global Products, a leader in luxury travel and hospitality. Thatcher drives product innovation at Virtuoso, shaping bespoke experiences that elevate service and exclusivity and customer loyalty. Before we dive into our deeper discussion, let's start with something fun. Each of you works in a different sector, but at the core, it's all about creating great experiences. So, in 1 minute or less, can you share a memorable moment where hospitality, whether great or terrible, completely changed your perception of a brand, a business, or a place? And I'll share a recent personal example to kick things off. Mine's very brief because I'm quite materialistic. I went to a conference, a virtuoso conference actually, and was on a panel there. And traveling to Las Vegas, you're crossing time zones, and the flight was delayed. So by the time I got there, it was like 6 p.m. I was a little disheveled and tired and grumpy. And the front desk agent asked me for my name, so I gave him my contact, my name, and my credit card. And they checked me, and then they asked me, "Well, is it one key or two key?" I said, "Just one key, just myself." I was really grumpy. And goes, "Well, two queen, okay?" I was like, "Sure, whatever." Right. And then he does something on his computer, and then he looks and said, "Well, can I just change you to one king?" I said, "Okay, doesn't matter. Be even better." I got up to my room at the end of the hallway. It was a three-room suite. Just that me being grumpy apparently gets me upgraded. So, but that was my experience. Okay, who would like to share?
I might take it in a slightly different direction from the, presidential suite to, a garbage can at Shake Shack. I was out shopping, this is a couple years ago now, with my wife for a new bed. We were in Pottery Barn, we were in this little strip mall, and it was lunchtime, so I'd never been to Shake Shack, so I went over to Shake Shack, and we had Danny Meyer coming to the class that I teach, at FIU, later that year, so I thought, "Oh, I should check out his offering." Went in, had a nice lunch, a nice gal, their hospitality manager, greeted us, brought us our tray of food. I was like, "Oh, this is interesting to be at a, quick serve restaurant, but have my food delivered to me. That's very nice." And then when we left, took the tray away and, dumped it for us. And as we were going to leave after we had purchased our bed, I realized I didn't have the key card to my car, my loaner car, my Tesla, and it had fallen out of my pocket, or maybe I put it on the tray. So we walked around, the strip mall looking for it. I went in and I sought out Millie Black is her name, and I said, "Millie, we were sitting over here." She's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And I said, "I think I might have put my key card on the tray." And I said, Where would it have been dumped?" And she said, "Well, it would have been in that garbage can right there." She said, "Just wait a minute." So she goes in the back. She comes out. She's got blue gloves on. She gives me a set of blue gloves. She said, "Let's dive in." And, I know it's kind of the inverse of hospitality, or the rear end of hospitality, but having someone who was willing to, dumpster dive with me to find a key card, we ended up finding, it turns out my wife found it out in the parking lot somewhere, but the fact that she was willing to do that, and, get her hands dirty and be right there beside me, and we've remained friendly since. She came to the class when Danny Meyer came, and used her as a shining example of enlightened hospitality.
That's great. Thank you, Steven.
In Even though it was a garbage can. By the way, amazing what you see, how much food people throw away, 3/4 full shakes and half-eaten burgers and fries. It's just like there's so much food waste,
And
you learn a lot just
we'll have
doing
to
one
do
dumpster
something.
dive, you know?
Anybody else would like to share?
I'll take a stab at it.
Sure.
Well, I'm an old hotel guy by trade. I spent my entire career in the hotel business before joining Baptist 15 years ago, and I was, extended, an offer to join Ritz-Carlton, and so I was living in New Orleans at the time, and so I flew up to Atlanta, and I went to the, Ritz-Carlton Buckhead, my first time there, and there was a mystique behind Ritz-Carlton, but walking in the lobby, impressive lobby, I got on the elevator and I was quite taken because there's this gorgeous Persian rug on the floor of the elevator. I had never seen such a thing before in my career, and there's a gorgeous crystal chandelier in the elevator. So the attention to detail that they had taken to design their hotel and their product around such a thing. And then I was quickly introduced to what they call the 3 steps of service. So it's an exquisite organization, and I ultimately worked 3 years for Ritz-Carlton, but to be exposed to that at a time, it left really a very memorable, uh, impression on me, and so they, to this very day, remain as, in my humble opinion, as one of the very top brands, between Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons. Auberge Hotels is another standout, so those are some memories that I keep to this very day.
Yeah, and as we'll talk about later too, it's about those moments that are memorable, that leaves an impression with it. And I think it crosses into all of our industries, whichever vertical you're in.
I'll share. I'll confess that I was recently in Antarctica, and I was very, very reluctant to take a trip there because I thought to myself, well, there are no people there, and I travel to interact with people, and meet people and see the culture. And I went with my family, and I remember that we every day you get in your gear and you sanitize your feet and you get in a Zodiac, and I think my daughters arranged this so that we got in the Zodiac and they threw the lines and it was just me and my family, and we went out among the icebergs, and they shut the engines off, and we sat there quietly. And it reminded me, because I had read Shackleton and The Wager, all these, adventurers that had gone to Antarctica, and I was thinking, "Gosh, they're crazy. It's haunting, it's frightening, it's scary." And I had the wrong perception. And when we were drifting in the Zodiac and we would see the penguins, I suddenly realized that the human connection of travel is part of connecting with yourself in nature. It's part of connecting with your family, and so my fear of not really having the hustle and bustle of travel was quickly replaced by the beautiful interruptions of nature and the connection with family, and I thought that was very profound because I'm not a bucket list kinda guy, and I felt like that really was, special, so.
Thank you, Thatcher. Would anybody else like to share before we go into the deeper discussion?
I'll just share one kind of the opposite end of the spectrum where I'm the kind of person I'll get in like an Uber and I'll have a 30-minute conversation with my driver. And it's lovely. On the other side, there's, sometimes where the driver is distracted and, you know, it's not always the most lovely experience. So when I was in San Francisco recently, I was really excited to try out Waymo. I know there's a lot of concerns around, automated driving. And so I have to say I was thoroughly impressed with the entire experience. And you kind of get in, they ask you, would you like to play some music? And being able to have conversations and not, I don't typically like to have conversations on the phone with if I have a driver there because I think it's I will ask them if I need to, but I try to refrain from that. So being able to kind of have that privacy in those conversations, I was very impressed with the entire experience. And so I know they're coming to Miami, and I'm excited to see how they'll do with Miami drivers. But it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum where there was no person involved, but the experience was so seamless and lovely that I thoroughly recommend it.
So they're driverless.
Yeah,
So who were you having a conversation with
on the phone. I mean, oh, in the yeah, I
in the car?
typically yeah.
Oh.
Where I usually wouldn't if it was an Uber driver or something. I don't wanna, like, have them have to listen to my conversation.
I'm very intrigued by them. I haven't had enough guts to get into one yet, mostly because I'm a little worried that there's nobody driving the car. Yeah, and what happens if somebody runs out?
They're overly cautious to a certain extent, so
Well, I think we'll go ahead and get into a question. So, Alex, we'll start with you. Hospitality has expanded well beyond hotels and restaurants to shape a variety of industries. Hospitality is now central to real estate development. How have you seen hospitality principles shape the properties you invest in or develop? And can you also share one hospitality driven innovation that has transformed a real estate project you've been involved with?
Sure, I'll take that in parts. I ultimately one of the one of the sort of human conditions that we're finding, particularly on the luxury side, is that no matter where you sit, people want to feel special, and they want to have special experiences, and they want more and more for those experiences to be tailored to them and their needs. So when we're now looking at real estate projects, we're trying to figure out both how to amenitize these projects in a way that um, people want to live in them and stay there, and basically you're creating kind of a bigger mousetrap, if you will, but also you're looking at what people's expectations are of how they want to do this. I'm in the middle now of participating in the design of a full-time living community in Puerto Rico. And we're looking at this from end to end to see how people want to actually live and what are the sort of amenities that they want and how far do these amenities need to be from where they are. Do they want to be communal about them or do they want to be individualized? So if you're looking at small, low rise
luxury buildings where you may have only 12 units in a building. Do you want pools and do you want spaces? Do people need dog washes? Do people need, like, you start thinking about like how people actually want to live and what do they want inside their residence versus what can be shared with other people. And we started talking to other folks that do a lot of this and a lot of development of this kind. And we're finding kind of a mixed bag of responses, including, no, they want the Olympic size huge resort pool, or they want the lap pool where they're going to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and do exercise type swimming versus resort like like uh, like pools. So it's created quite a challenge. It also has driven kind of the thinking of how do you actually amenitize things. It used to be that you did lots of tennis courts, and people now want 30 padel courts and no tennis courts. Or that you did, um, hot tubs were a big deal for a long time, and nobody really wants a hot tub. And I don't even know if people really want tubs. When we look at redoing hotels now, um, you know, we are taking tubs out and doing stand-up showers, and we have to keep some percentage with tubs, but most people don't really use a tub in a hotel room. Um, and uh, and as we're developing both pure hospitality assets and residential type assets, we're finding that trends are also changing. There used to be a time where the big luxury brands stamped out a brand standard, and a Four Seasons or a Ritz-Carlton hotel room needed to look the same whether you were in Tokyo or New York. And I think people's idea of luxury has changed, and there's no longer this idea that you should be in the same place wherever you are, and that you now need to be more authentic to the places that you're in, and luxury should feel different. So it, eh, and that's just one piece of it. The second part of this is going to be sort of training a staff to actually create that special moment, um, that you just experienced when you were grumpily checking in, um, but also giving people the empowered opportunity to actually do exceptional things for other people, because um, ultimately people feel special when they're treated special, no matter what the environment
Mhm.
is.
That's great. I love hearing the challenges as you mentioned them. Has it paid off? Being able to meet those challenges and providing the unexpected, or I guess in this case, new consumer expectations. Has it paid off in terms of revenue or interest?
I believe so. I think COVID changed a lot of the sort of both expectation, but also the financial reward of providing these experiences. There were breakthroughs where rates there used to be this sort of cap on rates, particularly hotel rates. And I'm sure for people that travel, they now experience a whole new set of reality on pricing, particularly in the higher end. There used to be, like, when you pushed $1,000 a night, there was like kind of this magical like thing where people, and now it's not unheard of for people to pay $2,500 a night, or whatever it may be on the luxury side. So some things got pushed, and I think people are willing to pay both on the way they live and on the way they travel for that exceptional service. Now, the flip side of that is you can't miss, right? It does create a big expectation of what you're delivering. And if you don't meet, if there's a mismatch there, the consumers will let you know with occupancy pretty quickly.
That's great. So in real estate, we see hospitality redefining spaces for both residents and visitors. And in Miami, we've seen that implemented at several different properties, like the Four Seasons residences at the Surf Club, where the residents have access to personalized concierge services in residence dining, housekeeping, priority reservations at on-site restaurants. That whole concept of comfort and experience carries over strongly into healthcare as well. And Ben, healthcare is adopting many hospitality principles today. How has Baptist Health incorporated a hospitality mindset to improve patient experiences? And can you share one initiative, perhaps a concierge service, a healing environment design, or other innovation that has made your hospitals feel more hospitality driven? And also, with technology becoming a bigger part of healthcare, how do you ensure the personal, caring touch isn't lost?
Well, I will start with maybe a little bonus reply, and that is we have 11 hospitals today in the 4 counties in South Florida. We got into the hotel business 8 years ago. We now have on our main campus, we have the Hilton Hotel, which we own, and that was an opportunity for us to provide for our patients, especially those coming from international locations, to have the opportunity. They're certainly they have their choices to make. They can stay anywhere they want, but this is one of the choices, and what we have seen is that the demand for that particular hotel is significant now because we're driving probably 50% of the occupancy for that Hilton. So that's just sort of one aside. That was our first venture into the hotel business. I will say maybe going back 15 years ago, the company did. I was hired 15 years ago, and we launched our hospitality department. And so we started back then with about 10 employees. Today we have 31 employees. And so what we have seen is that there is a return, an ROI, in that if we care for and cater to the consumer, who in our case is the patient or the patient's family, there is the relationship that can get established. And as was talked about earlier, there is the loyalty, the brand loyalty for Baptist has risen. It has always been very strong, but what we have seen is that if you can provide courtesy and empathy and respect for the consumer, our patients and family, we see that the return rate and the ambassadorial sort of approach for that family and the patient to go and spread the good word about what Baptist is all about has increased rather substantially. So I will say it was a bold move for Baptist, but we now see that the investment has paid off rather well.
Have you seen technology being used more in recent?
When you mention the technology piece, my very first job was with Fairmont Hotels, and the owner then, Richard Swig, uh, Fairmont was sold ultimately to Canadian Pacific, but at the time, there were 5 Fairmont hotels, and Mr. Swig was very this is the advent of the computer, so, I used to be younger, first of all, but, so back in the day, when the computers were coming out at the front desk, it was like, "This is going to be a disaster," because you lose that interpersonal connection when the consumer arrives at your front desk. You wanna have a personal moment with that individual, and so, he got over that eventually, but the technology that we have, I think, is an opportunity for us to really provide for that patient and the family what allows them to enjoy their experience, but we put particular attention into making sure that we have a human interaction because, yes, we're in the healthcare business, but we first and foremost are in the people business, and that's one thing that we keep close at hand.
So as long as you keep that uh, in front of you all the time, we're in the people business, and it helps. Technology allows you to provide a better experience.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Does anybody else have a perspective on how hospitality principles are shaping the industry?
I think there's unlimited demand for hospitality, in all facets of life that we are just now unearthing, untapping. And you see it in many different areas that people originally thought as hospitality as a resort experience or a restaurant dining experience. Now they want it in all facets of life. And concept that we're working on is doing a fixed based operation for aviation. I run our family office, and one of the things that's under our purview is our aviation group. And it occurred to me that when you pull up and get on one of your planes, that it was a very basic experience. There was no concierge service. There's just car, plane, leave. Now, what if something happens with weather, equipment failure, you're waiting on a guest or a client or whatever, and it was like, where do you go? Where do you hang out? Where's the experience? Where's this someone that says, "Hey, can I help you out? Can I get you something that you currently don't have?" And so I'm working on developing a concept where there's a nice terminal, and there's many nice terminals around the country, but that's all they are, is nice terminals. There's no that hospitality feel and touch when you arrive, and do some kind of membership equity with people that own private planes, and have that full experience that you're being cared for when you get on property, or whether you leave property and someone helps you get to point A to point B on the ground. So it's a concept now that we're working on, and hopefully we get to fulfill that at Fort Lauderdale International, and and maybe potentially roll that out and license it to other major airports where there's an NFL team and or a casino, something like that. So that's but that's just one segment. But the hospitality experience really extends all the way from construction, which our family is in, making sure that, yeah, the disruption is there, it's real, but making sure our people understand the sensitivity to that experience of upgrading a facility or making somewhere, you know, a more, magnificent experience is that's what's really important. It starts with someone helping someone out of the car if they need it, and getting them to point A, point B, or just taking care of their general safety.
And I love that you said hospitality is there's unlimited demand for it. It's everywhere from what we have seen and what we have discussed so far. But I want to dive into the heart of why it matters, and that's consumer expectations. Con- Customers today expect more than just great service. They want memorable, meaningful interactions. And Kamal, in the luxury lifestyle sector, creating memorable experiences is key, and you're the king of it. How do you curate high end, hospitality rich experiences through media and events that engage affluent consumers and keep them loyal? And could you give us an example of a brand experience that really resonated with your audience?
Yeah, so everything in hospitality is getting blended. If you look at LVMH right now, opening restaurants, taking a wine label like Cheval Blanc, opening up hotels, Fendi Bistro, they're going to open an Italian Tiffany Cafe, Dior restaurant with Dominique Crenn. So you see a whole trend of blending fashion, wine labels, and so forth. And one of my favorite stories with them in creating customer loyalty, and even referencing in your first question, how did you see something turned around? We worked with Hublot, the watchmaker that LVMH owns, and I had a very, very big collector that had a poor experience, who is a very high value customer to them, and Hublot's the official timekeeper for FIFA and the World Cup, and they ended up curating something where it was a special experience where you went to Brazil. Pele, rest in peace, King Pele was the ambassador of the brand, so they created a unique experience with Pele and a group of people that went, and Rihanna and a bunch of people ends up jumping on board. Everyone's a fan of Pele, and I saw that customer's experience not only change his brand loyalty, became a much bigger customer, where he was then invited to the Russian World Cup and the Qatari World Cup and buying $1 million watches. But it turned, his whole experience around, and seeing the integration of how they would bring Azuma Fendi into Qatar and so forth has been very
enlightening and impressive as, how Bernard Arnault's been sort of leading the charge and blending all the sort of hospitality and luxury.
And I love that you mentioned Hublot. There's a watch company, LVMH is in the business with luxury and retail. It's fascinating to see other industries who recognize the importance of consumer expectations and what they're looking for. Like, how do you identify all these different verticals that you work with?
For me, it's the same consumer, the person that's chartering the plane or owning the plane, that's buying that Patek Philippe or staying in the $2,000-3,000 a night hotels. And if you look at Miami Beach right now, from the Ritz on 16th, the Rosewood, Amman, Casa Cipriani, Auberge, you're going to have probably the biggest aggregation of $2,000 a night rooms. So I just feel the whole market appetite for luxury has just become so much bigger, so it just continues to grow, and we're in the market of the perfect example of it.
Love that. Now, Steven, you're in a different space, but the beverage industry plays a crucial role in shaping hospitality experiences, whether through curated wine lists, exclusive tastings, or elevated bar programs. At Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits, how do you see hospitality principles driving customer engagement in the beverage world? And can you share an example of how a strategic partnership or an experiential event or innovative service approach has enhanced guest experience and brand loyalty in the industry?
Yeah, so Michael, on the first part of your question about customer engagement, I want to take it from two perspectives: the perspective of my day job with Southern Glazers as the head of strategy, and the perspective of my FIU executive in residence job teaching a seminar on hospitality strategic leadership. Um, and I think there's something instructive by taking that two-pronged approach. In my day job, we spent a lot of time at a retreat at a esteemed business school 2.5 years ago, coming up with our purpose statement. And we were trying to whittle it down to something that was memorable, not too many words. We didn't want to print up cards. We wanted people to just be able to remember it. And it was 9 words: we build world-class brands for moments that matter. And that became kind of our purpose call, our why. And associated with that, we also came up with 5 kind of values around honesty, excellence, agility, respect, teamwork. And the first letters of those words spell heart. So our heart values. And I mention those 2 things because I think they both address who the customer is. And this is where I want to bring in a little bit from my class experience and Danny Meyer, who I cited earlier in his book, Setting the Table. When he lays out who the key stakeholders are in hospitality, you'd think it would be the kind of typical, well, we got to start with the consumer, right, and work backwards. But he doesn't. He starts with the staff and the team. Because if you don't have the right staff and team and ethos in place, the heart values in place, if you don't hire the 51 percenters who are higher in EQ than IQ, you want obviously high in both, but if you don't do that, you can't offer the level of hospitality and service to that customer or consumer that you desire. You won't be as successful. So he puts, this is staff and his team first, then the consumer or customer, then it's your purveyors, your suppliers, your business partners. Third, fourth, the communities that you're serving. And then finally, it's the owners and the leaders. And they're last. And the thing is, he says, look, if you do all the other 4 stakeholders right in that order, the owners and leaders are going to be just fine. You're going to be very successful. So I think, there's a good kind of interplay from the luminaries who have done this with what we try to do in our business. And our purpose statement is about, building moments that matter for our customers downstream, which are retailers, and by extension, consumers who they serve, and our upstream customers, our suppliers, who are very important to us because we don't own any of the brands we sell. We are given the rights and the franchise to sell them. So we have to delight a lot of different customers, and finally, our own employees. If we don't have them working in concert, either downstream or upstream with our suppliers, we're just not going to be successful. So, a little bit of a perspective from, again, my day job and from my night job. In terms of experiential partnerships, events, innovative services, I'll touch on each one of those maybe just briefly. In terms of partnerships, we have 1,500 suppliers, and Meldick likes to say they're all our family members. They're all like children. We got to love them all. And with apologies to Mel, it wasn't quite as baritone as he says it. But
Great.
um, and but there are a group of strategic suppliers that starting with I'm not playing favorites, but I'm going to pick a local one, Bacardi, who we were the first to align with nationally. And when we aligned with that supplier, the volume was significant. We were with them in every state, and we were able to align our selling and marketing processes. We were able to align our logistics capabilities, our insights capabilities, all elements, by the way, of our vision, and do it in a really consistently high manner, and work in synergy with them, joint planning, et cetera, to just have a step change in performance with them when we got together 8 years ago, aligned everywhere. And again, we've done that with other suppliers, Diageo, Moet Hennessy, Pernod, Constellation, et cetera, multiple others. But that's one example. And we gave them a dedicated division, and they had direct line, communications into our leaders. So, providing that very intimate, extended enterprise approach, I think, was all enabled by this concept of hospitality. In terms of sort of special events, I think the South Beach Wine and Food Festival is just a great example. And by the numbers, $30 million every year in local stimulus to local businesses and partners, hundreds of local partners we work with, $40 million over the last 24 years to FIU Chaplin, thousands of students involved, hundreds, 500 or so experts, chefs, et cetera. So really bringing together the industry, bringing our suppliers, the suppliers to so be our suppliers. So really bringing in together our suppliers with our local partners, retailers, restaurants, together with the students, faculty. It's really a great, the epitome of hospitality, if you ask me, in terms of a special event.
I love that you said putting the owners and I guess the owners at the bottom of the
Yeah,
list, right?
yeah.
I'd love to get Alex's feedback on that one. As an owner and as developer owner, do you think owners have the same perspective, as what Stephen had mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, yes. Whether you start with the consumer, you start with your staff, which ultimately deals with the consumer. Uh, I think that the answer there's no like specific right or wrong way to do this, as long as the result becomes kind of the same on the experience side, right? I do believe that there is and you talked about this a little bit earlier, there is this higher expectation of what needs to be delivered from the consumer, and how at every level, and how sort of choosy the consumer or finicky the consumer has become. We saw it a lot as we experienced our entry into Las Vegas, when we purchased the Hard Rock in Vegas. Um, we uh, started understanding kind of it's probably the most competitive hospitality market on the planet, where both pricing is constantly dynamic, on because there are so many rooms and there's different demands on the rooms depending on where you are. And every one of those properties is a city and is trying to create their own environment where the consumer's not going to leave. So whether it's, in our case, it was 16 restaurants that we had to deal with in one property. And we're considered kind of a boutique hotel at 1,500 rooms when there's properties that have 4,000 rooms. So all of a sudden I started at least understanding how dynamic and demanding this was going to be. And people had their favorite place to go, but if they got treated better or got something extra somewhere else, then they were easily movable to a different property. And it wasn't just price. And I do think it's more like value and experience and relationship and creating excitement and creating other things that are not just the dollar quotient. People are not, I mean, obviously there are people that look for the price, but people that are looking for experiences are willing to pay for them as well. And this got us sort of thinking very much like it was talked about, the like at what point do you own that consumer? Is it the moment of booking, right? Or is it the moment of that they walk through your door? Or is it the moment that they walk through your room? Or is it when they went and they're hungry and their flight was delayed and they're trying to look for a place to eat? Or is it like where is it that you're gonna actually capture that 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 person? And it's kind of the same thing that you were talking about, yeah, flying in a private plane is a great experience, but FBOs are kind of like the dirty liquor store of the experience. And the only thing you remember is, how fast you went through that lobby or how quickly you went through that bathroom, or, if they had a cool snack, you might grab that. Uh, Popcorn or chocolate chip cookies, and then you're like getting out of there as quickly as possible until you sit down and your engine has a bad valve or something, and then you got problems. But it is kind of like, what is that experience all the way through, and how far back can you take it? Because if you had a bad experience when you called in to make a reservation, whether it's at a restaurant, whether it's at a hotel, or simply in a residential project when somebody pulled up and you had a guest take their car and somebody was rude to your guests in a building or whatever. Where is it that these interactions are taking place, and how much are you able to create the kind of culture that actually is making people feel special? And I think that this whole thing about feeling special has to be put through all the way. And it doesn't matter at what part of the spectrum you're playing in, whether it's the ultra luxury side or the most basic side, right? The Shake Shack example is not a luxurious place, but you were so grateful for an employee that's willing to go open up a garbage can to find your key.
Yeah, I think it starts with being seen, heard, and then made to feel special, like you felt when you checked in and you were grumpy, and they obviously saw and heard you, and then took it to a different level.
I'd love to open this up. Does anyone else want to add a perspective on building loyalty through experience?
I sense that from this conversation, and we talk about this at Virtuoso, is that we're actually in the feeling business as much as the experience business. Meaning, how do you make me feel? And I think the notion of starting with heart, and it's interesting. I think I read somewhere instead of saying FTEs, they say heart count instead of head count. And I think the perspective is also where do you create the human connection so that it's scalable as well as being, because it's almost like you can't predict where the beautiful moments will occur, but you know how to create the environment where they can happen. And so I think if you're producing that in a way that's with consistency and scalability, then you're well on your way to providing that intimate personalization. But at the same time, there's room. There's and you're creating a human experience. Um, we often say automate the predictable and humanize the exceptional. This is what our leadership believes in, and so it's humanizing that exceptional that is the hard part. And I would say that I I really enjoy the forums of this knowledge exchange because the future is in the people in the room, the students, and they're going to be the ones who are going to decide how in their careers they're going to pursue the noble purpose of service to others. And I think there's a lot of nobility in that, and it starts with education. So I thank you for bringing us together. But I think also that the notion of service, it's interesting when you see convergence of luxury lifestyle brands, you see how design and the aesthetic create that environment. You breathe life into it with people, and I'm really glad. I would just support the notion that you can create museums that are gorgeous, but if they don't have a soul and you're not creating that human connection, you're it's people will pass you by and that loyalty won't occur.
Was it Michael Pollan said, we started, back in the Sahel days, roaming the Sahel, eating around a fire, and that's what made us human. Eating together around a fire and connecting is what makes us human. I mean, hospitality is the core of humanity.
You feel that at the end of the day. I mean, I belong to a club up north, and yeah, it's highly amenitized, world class. I mean, people come from all over the world to go um, do sporting clays and shoot there. And I would say that what makes it really special are the people that operate and maintain it and care for their guests and their members. And you feel that in a way that you go to other places, right? They have great stuff to look at. It's cool, but without that human element of care, and let's face it, I hate to say it so bluntly, you can't teach I give a crap. You have to own that to really care for somebody. And as a member or a guest or as a business person, if you instill that philosophy of caring, you get there somehow, some way.
One of the things I wanted to touch upon when you're talking about the customer experience and loyalty, one of the great case studies and the works that I've seen is what Hermes did with the Birkin bag or their bags or their Kelly bags, where you'd already think if you had the resources to go to a store and say, here's $12,000 for a bag, you'd be able to get it, which seems a little bit excessive. But they actually keep loyalty by scarcity. And you have to come in there and continue to spend. And to me, it's the most impressive luxury brand because as a single brand, it's half the market cap of LVMH's 100 plus brands. And in the case studies of the luxury world, I feel the following that they've built and the secondary market that, you get a bag for 9,000, a mini Kelly selling for 30,000 online. And they built a very strong following just based on scarcity. And you have to continue being a consumer to be able to qualify for the bag. And it's very strange to see that there's a wait list to get on a wait list. But that's a real way I feel that they keep, that luxury consumer engaged.
Back to you, Chad. So, hospitality isn't just influencing individual industries, it's creating new opportunities for cross industry collaboration. And, Chad, from your perspective in construction, how are hospitality ideals influencing the way buildings and infrastructure are designed and built? And when you're thinking about constructing hotels or mixed use projects, What hospitality driven considerations have become essential to meet modern expectations?
I would, yeah, the resort 5-star living is an experience that is always being upgraded, and that's always going to be a demand for that higher level experience. So like a Pier 66 in Fort Lauderdale, that's in my opinion offering that at the highest levels with residential and a hotel component, and we didn't build that, so I'm not doing an advertisement for them, but I as a unit owner, I arrive, they know my name, they know what my preferences are, and I've only been there 3 times. Okay, so and they're going for the highest levels of achievement and accomplishments. So you break that down into basic workforce housing. Now there are the apartment buildings that we grew up in as young adults, and now there are apartment buildings of the current day and modern era where there's still that level of expectation of amenity and highly amenitized workforce housing projects that we invest in and we also build are like the new standard. So they don't want a vintage asset from the 80s. They want that resort look and feel, the nice swimming pool, the cookout areas, the dog washes, the live workspace. All that has changed and migrated vastly in the last 7 to 8 years. For different reasons. People want to work at home, or they want to be able to work part time at home, or whatever. And they also want to have a place of arrival when they get there. Safety's always an issue. Technology allows for that, but you look at just the basic form of workforce housing has evolved into something that we didn't expect, but the demand was there. The hospitality demand was there in that space, in that area. The wine Wednesdays, the taco, Tuesdays, um, having that common space for the residents to get together and bond and sense of community is there. That wasn't there in the products of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. So I bring it back to that because the demand for hospitality is in every form of life, in life cycle.
Yeah, that's a great example of how the built environment plays a role in hospitality. Thatcher, luxury travel is evolving rapidly, and collaboration plays a big role. Virtuoso is at the forefront of luxury travel, where personalization and exclusivity define the guest experience. How do you see hospitality principles shaping the future of high end travel? And can you share an example of how Virtuoso is leveraging innovation to create more meaningful, bespoke experiences for travelers?
I think I'm gonna have to take that in bites, smaller bite sizes, but I would just plus what Chad has mentioned because you use the word community, and I think that's critical, and particularly in answering the question that Dean Cheng has just proposed. Virtuoso works in a model of a network, and the network has partners and network members, meaning so we have our luxury suppliers, hotels, ships, destination management companies. We work also with destinations themselves, tourism boards, and we have the travel advisor community. And what we do is we create a a network so that we can elevate the performance of the hotels and the advisor. And it's the whole is greater than the sum of the parts concept. And the idea is to provide through technology and automation in some cases, but provide a platform from which the human connections can thrive. Because in our space, it is about community and human connection. We strongly believe that. And if we can give the tools to the, the advisor community and we can match their skills and talent in delivering incredible travel experiences, memorable moments, then we're doing our job while increasing sales and enterprise value for partners, hotels, and the advisors themselves. So our challenge is to create this network that incrementally adds value to the members. And so what we do is we use partnerships in technology to provide solutions. We combine those with ways to then and with data. Data is very important to us in the sense that with a network, you can start to have insights that allow you to help each other and best practice sharing. So an example is how we would take a new property or a destination, and we would create a platform to educate advisors. So you're opening a new hotel or you're launching I think there's 60 new cruise ships that are being entered in the market. Not all of them are partners of ours, but there's a huge amount of supply coming on in luxury. And so how do we tell that story in a unique, remarkable, competitive way with efficiency so that it can be shared to the right people so that they can go to their clients at the right moment and invite them? So there's a lot of complexity to that, and I think, if you look at the way we actually create community, it's very similar to the learning environment. It's almost like a community of people who they need knowledge, so we have a massive training platform, asynchronous, synchronous, online training, face-to-face training on products. We then give them the tools, and we guide them with how best to go to market with those products. We're not in the business of selling hotel rooms or cruises. We're in the business of helping others do that more efficiently. So, creating that community, building, and I would say the other thing, and it relates to some of the things that we were talking about, this convergence of luxury. There's a huge amount of trust that's required. You have to create that trust that then builds the loyalty. And so part of what we do is the quality of the products that we offer and the performance that we can provide in terms of enhancing enterprise value creates trust, and that's what builds loyalty. And you had mentioned that. So I use the training example in the launch of a new property as being part of merging the technology with the so it allows for a better human connection, and they can effectively, um, be successful in creating these wonderful moments.
That's perfect segue. You mentioned data analytics, and I also heard human connection throughout this conversation. And we know AI, automation, and data analytics are reshaping the guest interactions in all sectors. So, Maria, how is technology redefining hospitality-driven experiences? And what are some of the biggest opportunities and challenges in integrating tech without losing the personal touch?
I think it's all about kind of knowing when to leverage tech. And I think this was mentioned a few times on the panel is kind of how do you leverage it more on the back end to make your processes more efficient in order to free up your people to really have that human connection and surprise and delight your guests. So how can you provide now with so much technology and data, we are able to better understand the preferences of people and then empower our team members to be more efficient with the experience. So one example I think of is, talking about Ritz-Carlton, I in college, I interned at Ritz-Carlton in the PR department, and I remember even though I was in the back of the kind of back of house, they had everybody have these notepads, and if you came across a guest and you noticed a preference that they had, a coffee order that they made, you'd write it down and you'd make sure to give it back to the team to kind of file that in their folio so that we would always know what their coffee order was. I remember we have a stand-up meeting every morning where they would go over customer preferences, guest preferences. So there was one person from Nassau who's like, their room number always had to add up to an even number. It's the craziest preferences, but now I can imagine with the use of AI, you can create an entire portfolio of someone before they even step foot uh, in the hotel. The key is not being coming off of creepy when they get there, but I think it's really empowering the team members with the data that they need to create this unique guest experience. So one of my first job out of college, I was with a travel company called Travel Zoo for 7 years, and we put out a newsletter every week with top travel deals. Now I can see through the use of AI why that newsletter couldn't be hyper personalized to each person on this each subscriber with like, hey, we know these 5 destinations were on your bucket list. There are these deals for that. So I think just better leveraging the technology and the data that you have to create these unique experiences.
Do you see facial recognition one day being used? I don't know about intrusively, but as a tool to help us deliver better experiences.
Yeah, totally. I think, why do we need hotel room keys and isn't it more safe if like it's only facial recognition to let you into your room?
And also to know what your consumers' preferences are as they're walking up to you, instead of the little notepads.
Yeah. Oh, I remember the valet would like radio into like, "Hey, front desk, Maria just walked in." That could all be made more efficient if like it was just facial recognition. The valet person wouldn't have to kind of radio over anymore.
And that's been done manually, by the way. Will Guidara, 11 Madison Park, they would do the online research.
Yeah.
So the guests coming in, they could call them by name. They could put their coats by table, so they didn't, they already knew a fair bit about the guests who were coming in. But I think once you get AI and facial recognition kind of technologies in there, it can happen more rapidly and more in real time.
Yeah. So as industries continue to blend and redefine hospitality, let's take a forward-looking approach. What do you think hospitality will look like in 10 years?
I mean, even in 10 years, I see the evolution starting now. If you look at a Dior, they're going to beach clubs in Saint-Tropez to that. So I see a continuing of the brand extension into your lifestyle from, they're making towels at the beach club now and fully extending the brands and immersing you in such a different way. So I feel it's going to continue in that trend even deeper.
I agree that, we've seen this sort of convergence of it started out with sort of simple technology. And I think now it's sort of how do you interact with brands? And some brands have, feel like they have more permission than others to become something different. There's some things where it works, like a Dior beach club, as it was mentioned. I also see the emergence of some new thinking and some new brands that will actually sort of take a central role in creating that convergence and actually creating that feeling special. One of the kind of sleepers in our industry that became very well known to a circle of people, but it's not a household name, is Discovery Land Company, for example. Discovery, and I don't know how familiar you are with them. Discovery basically started creating communities around the world that became second homes, third homes, fourth homes, fifth homes, sixth homes. Like people continue buying in their properties, and it they I think are at the today from a developer standpoint probably at the forefront of creating these communities where they're creating also constant moments um, for their guests and for their owners, um, and they're doing kind of the unexpected, and it's small things that you wouldn't think about. Like, they invented this comfort station idea. So throughout their properties, they have these comfort stations and they're full of snacks and drinks and stuff, and nothing is being charged. So it's not an opportunity to actually engage with a transaction with the consumer. It's just an opportunity to be nice to you.
This
So
intermediary step in FBO before you open up your luxury hospitality.
Correct. So these like moments they created and these comfort stations that they scatter became kind of their hallmark, and people and think about what that costs them compared to selling a $5 million lot that somebody built a $20 million house on top of. The idea that they're giving you a bunch of like free potato chips and and soda or well curated healthy snacks or whatever it may be, is almost negligible, but that's what people remember. So the I do think that there are other things that are going to happen where you continue having this convergence of luxury and of brands.
I think one of the interesting things about Discoveryland too is that you can it accordions. If you want to have privacy, you can have privacy. If you want to have community, you have community. And if you want to take your shoes off and play 18 holes of golf in your bare feet and go swimming, you can do that as well. And I think they've really, but what
Yeah,
stayed
it's a
the
no rules.
yeah, no, it's a no rules kind of thing. And what stayed the same, though, in my mind, is the essential concept of intergenerational togethering, meaning the idea was family. And so I think the future 10 years from now is how do you manage the life cycle of the generations of your customer so that you can appeal to their occasion-based needs in particularly in leisure. But imagine if you're working and you're at Yellowstone or one of the Discoveryland properties, to Chad's point, you need a place to work while you're remote. And so I think as we look at the future, it's gonna be how do you really have the right approach to managing the life cycle of your customer? Because as I get older, I wanna unplug. I don't wanna I'm not that Gen Z, DIY. I wanna unplug and be cared for, to everyone's point. So so I think there's a lot to be said for the frictionless or the because particularly with the way that our society is just flooding us with information, I sort of cited the Antarctica because of the fact is we need to pause, and I think the future has to have some form of nature in it to balance us in whether it's constructed or natural, it needs nature. I think there's gonna be a need for, um, kind of mitigating this massive amount of, velocity in terms of how we consume information and how we then deal with our health and our lifestyle needs, in the future. I know that's
Otherwise we all end up Ben's customers. So the which we which some of us already are. So the but the convergence is that as we think of the community we're building currently, actually we did a deal with Baptist to provide a health center at the community, and we started thinking about what do people want? What do they care about? They care about healthcare, they care about education, they care about the environment. We also we took 100 acres and created a farm uh, that will provide all of the vegetables and fruits. We were surprised that in such a rich soil place like Puerto Rico, there's not more farming, and they actually are importing kind of produce and fruits and vegetables when they're in a rainforest environment and they should have some of the best fruits and vegetables.
Importing at a premium.
They're importing at a premium. So we actually decided to take 100 of our 1,100 acres, and actually some of our initial hires were agronomers that have come in and have now planned out both indoor and outdoor planting, which we're doing already, like before we're building the hotel portion. And we also thought about how do we expand this to the community, to the wider community, because we're going to be producing a ton of fruits and vegetables out of there. And we could actually, same thing with landscaping. Think about how much you pay for landscaping plants. I was like, we got to plant all of our landscaping now so that in 5 years we can uproot this and actually move it to the homes that are being built. So things, as we're thinking about this, you really are trying to figure out how do you create that experience? How do you create sort of the community, to his point, and how do you actually start merging all these different things and understanding what people really care about?
Yeah. That's great. And hospitality today, as we've discussed, is more than service. It's about creating intentional, seamless, and unforgettable experiences. And across industries, it's the key to customer loyalty and innovation. Then it's shaping the way we live, we work, and we connect, as you pointed out. The future belongs to those who master the art of experience. And I want to thank each of our panelists today for sharing the insights. This conversation has highlighted not only the power of hospitality, but also its incredible potential across industries. And I'd love for the students to ask some questions. We have a couple of minutes available. Does anybody like to ask some questions? Yes.
Thank you all for being here this morning. It's been a wonderful, enriching experience learning from you all. My question is to all of you. As Dr. Chen had mentioned multiple times, that the intention is to build customer loyalty through experience. Um, my question is, as a student who's entering into this industry and one day hoping to be an industry leader like you all are now, what what effect are you all having in terms of your strategic planning with your current staff, especially the lower and mid-level staff that are the day-to-day client-facing members representing your businesses, because they're the ones that are actually affecting and embodying the company culture and the organizational behavior. What all are you all doing now to support and enrich and invest in your staff members to help them be as efficient and great and knowledgeable, aside from making great hires like you all mentioned, because that's of course step one? But what steps are you all taking to win over their loyalty and pull the best out of your staff members?
Well, we have two of the biggest employers in town.
So our founder and former chairman, Harvey Chaplin, used to say, people are our greatest asset, and we invest intensely, uh, not just in recruiting the best, um, empowering them, and as he used to say, and getting out of the way and letting them do their thing, but also a lot of training. We heard a lot about that, in your how you have to train up your staff to really be able to deliver against the value proposition that you're trying to achieve for your suppliers and your customers. So that's a very big part of what we do. A lot of leadership training, but it goes down all through the ranks. We have 12,000 people who are certified wine specialists. So making sure that they can deliver on the value proposition that we're promising to our suppliers and downstream customers.
I might try to answer your question also, and I would say that at Baptist, we're only in the 4 counties in South Florida. We happen to be the largest employer south of Orlando. So we now have 28,500 staff members, team members. And then we have, in addition, we have another 4,500 physicians who are part of the family. So over 30,000 people. And I think it kind of starts with the selection process, where there is a somewhat painful process because it's a rigorous program to ensure that you're identifying the right individuals that you're going to have the proper match. And we all probably have worked in environments where you may have that toxic individual. We go to great lengths to try to sift out those individuals and ensure that we're going to have someone who's going to be a long-term staff member. We have some of the more tenured people working with me directly as a 35-year Baptist Health nurse. And there are opportunities for everyone to move to other locations. And when you look at the more senior people at Baptist Health, to me, it's a big compliment to the organization because people stay there because they love the work that they do. They love the experience of being able to take care of people and to provide care and comfort to patients and families. So I think it starts really with the invitation to come and join our team process, and it's a rigorous one, but I think it's also intentional because you wanna ensure that chemistry is going to be something that's going to complement the organization and also complement the employee going forward.
Cultural alignment's key.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In that regard, and this is something for you all to keep in mind as you go into your interviews, coming out of Chaplin, there are three basic questions that employers are asking themselves when they're hiring talent. And I think I've had some success with that over the last 20 years. I have a 90% retention at our company for people I've hired in. And, the first question is, can you do the job? Do you have the competency skills to hit the ground running day one? Second question, your ways of working. How do they line up with the ways of working? My team, a lot of thought partnering, ex-consultants, strategy people. So you got to be very collaborative and not be one of those people that likes to work solo, go into a room, come back with an answer in 2 weeks. No, we got to work collaboratively together. So how you work is really important. Question two. And question three is the most important in terms of retention long term, that not 90% retention over 20 years is, why do you want to work with us? The first two questions answer why we want, why we might want to hire you. But the third question is, why do you want to work with us? And it's a simple question, but most people don't have a really good, thoughtful example. And it's really the alignment of your why with the company's why. And if those things aren't aligned, I've had great people who answer the first question, great, incredibly talented, great experience base. Second question, I'd love to work on highly collaborative. They can't compellingly tell me why they want to work on my team, in my company, in my industry, in South Florida. And I've not hired a lot of McKinsey people and Bain people and whatever, because they couldn't answer that question. Because you know what? They'll view you as just a stepping stone. They won't be that long-term hire, that physician that you want around to make a career there. So something for you to keep in mind as you go into your interviews is, those are the three basic questions that every employer is asking themselves, and make sure you have good answers for them.
I have a third piece, which is, at least for us today, hiring young talent is hugely important to bridge our own knowledge gap of how technology, how social media, how we market, how we're going to be influenced. I feel that there is now a real generational gap between the way that I grew up consuming marketing and the things that I cared about and how I processed information, and probably that's everybody that's not sitting in this circle, and how you guys are looking at this, and having people in our organization that understand this, but not just understand it from a educational standpoint, but understand it kind of from a visceral underneath piece, is very, very important for us as we continue designing properties in Las Vegas or properties. I mean, you're the consumer much more than I'm the consumer. And there is now like this sort of gap where things are just simply different about how you process information, where you're getting your news from, where you're getting your information from, what is influencing you, um, and how do we create the environments that are actually things that you're going to like, which may be different than things that I'm gonna like. So kind of talking about like, because what I really want is to be sitting on his boat in Antarctica with not everything quiet, while you may want really strong internet. and and that's number one on your list, and it better be free.
Sounds like an episode of White Lotus.
But there are kind of this disparaging ideas, and don't be shy to to talk as you're talking to people about how you can help that organization in those areas.
Tache, you want to add on?
I would also, I'm gonna flip it and put it on us as much as you too, in that what I find that leadership is, there's a debate, we're all leaders, but what does that mean and how do you develop leadership? And I was, I'm thinking about putting myself walking in your shoes and what it would be like, all of you, to really pursue your passion in the industry. And how do you, so I, first of all, would say, think about how you want to contribute, and you can naturally evolve into leading in that space if you feel strongly about where you want to contribute. And I'm going to just say role modeling. Our job is to role model that. in everything that we do. And I think one of the keys to success is if you act in the interest of others before yourself and you're generous, because hospitality is about generosity. And if you don't have that gene of acting in the best interest of others first, which is true leadership, by the way. And I would say the second piece is stand for something bigger, than yourself. You will succeed. And I say that more philosophically than it's hard to teach that, but I think there's a value here as role models, as leaders, that we stand for something bigger than ourselves. And then that will that will put wind in your sails and you'll take off. It's when you kind of live in a state of fear. Don't be afraid to fail forward. That's the other piece, because most of all of us here can tell you plenty of stories about how um, what we need to encourage you to do is not to be afraid. Don't make the same mistake twice, but don't fear. Don't fear when you're moving forward.
That's great. Do we have time for one more question?
My name is Valeria. I am a master's student at obviously Chaplin at FIU. And my question is I'm an aspiring entrepreneur in the hospitality business. I want to own my own boutique hotel, hopefully in the future. And my question is I see a lot of divide between experiences in terms of are they driving more towards individualism or community? Because on your experience, Maria, I see robots building experiences and kind of like people less experiences. So my question is, do you as industry leaders believe that experiences are kind of shifting more towards individualism? So kind of like your experience, or more towards communities and shared workspaces and shared um spaces for everyone?
That's a great question.
For me, in the luxury world, I see a lot of individualism and the sense of personalization. Um, and then I could see more in a general market, the use and need of community and smarter shared space. But as you were talking about your experience, in Antarctica and so forth, I feel that in at least the luxury space, more and more personalization and individualization.
In food and beverage, it's a bit of a blend. I like to say that coming out of COVID, we had 2 generations maturing. We had the Gen Zers on one side, kind of coming of age and being a real force in our industry, being legal drinking age. And we had the boomers getting older and realizing they had to lose weight and taking Ozempic and doing all those things. Both of those things kind of have put some big disruptors in our industry in terms of consumption patterns and trends. People moving to low and no alc and different formats, RTDs and things like that. And so I think some of that's individually driven, by a desire to be healthier and be around for their grandchildren because their kids are getting married later, and so they want to be healthy. And some of it's is more communal. If you think about Gen Zers, a lot of them are very socially conscious. We have a wine brand out of South Africa, the largest premium wine brand sold here in America, and they have formats for the boomers in bottles that are 90 plus rated wines that you can buy. The name of the brand is Labanzi, and then they also have RTD, Chenin Blanc in cans that they sell through Whole Foods. That's really geared more towards Gen Z and millennials, and they give half their profits to this charity called Pebbles in South Africa to help the people who work on the estates, and so they have this whole charitable piece to what they do. They're sustainable, they're organic, et cetera, et cetera. So they're trying to work all the angles to appeal across generations to the sort of bespoke demands and needs that are resident there. And some of them individual, some of them group. So I kind of split the answer.
I mean, I see that, there's a time and place for each thing. I think I can think of even some startups locally that are focused on leveraging technology, but for in real life experiences. A friend of mine started a company called Base, which kind of matches people for in person dinners. I think more and more people are putting value on the community aspect of things and in-person experiences. So I think there's certainly technology that can better create those experiences. But in the end, you want some face-to-face experiences.
Great, thank you. I think Nia, you raised your hand, right? Okay, would you like to go? We'll take the last question.
Thank you for being here. My name is Nia. I'm a hospitality management master's student, and I did my bachelor's in public relations and advertising. So I guess my question would be to Kamal. What do you think is going to be the next big disruptor in the luxury hospitality industry, and how do you think brands should prepare for that?
I think social media is something we didn't speak much about as far as the technology that's already made a big change. And I think the evolution of social media and obviously now layering in AI is going to be the big differentiator. And I look at the watch industry, and at one point, everyone was sitting in Switzerland when the iWatch was coming out, fearing that who's going to need, everyone's telling time on their phone. The industry is going to disappear. But the advent of Instagram, everyone made it a social status to take a picture of your Rolex, your Audemars, and sales actually went up considerably with the watch. So I feel that there's going to be other technologies and the evolution of now. People use TikTok to see restaurants and reviews. And that's why I feel as social media evolves, there'll be more tools showing more lenses on hospitality.
That's great. Anybody else would like to jump in on that?
Just show you my two watches, just in case you're old school Detroit, Shinoa, and new school. I can't. I'm tormented.
And you don't have an Aura ring and a glucose monitor. I
Discuss with your therapist.
I actually do have an Aura ring and Apple Watch.
I have my Whoop in my watch. Yeah.
And I will tell you, in social media, there's another great discovery, because a brand like Richard Mille, they make 5,000 watches, but people were posting about 150,000 watches. So they could realize that 1 in 15 watches were real. So I think it's going to show you more authenticity down the line, because the brand actually makes 3,500 watches, but 150,000 watches were posted online.
Yeah, I think Casios are coming back, right? I feel like I need to go find mine now. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time today and sharing your insights and expertise with our students. And I want to thank our students and our team here today too for supporting us on this. I think the conversation has been amazing. So truly thank you. And we look forward to what Jeff's going to write up for us. Thank you.
Thank you.